Well, hello there, my beautiful Next Gen fam, and welcome to another Mentor Moments with Next Gen HQ. We are so excited for our guest today to chat all things media and personal brand development, which I know is going to check so many of your boxes of those out there watching this right now. So sit back, take out your notebooks, and enjoy what's to come. We are so honored to have Jess Ponce on with us today to share his journey and expertise in developing personal and company brands to capitalize on their star quality. We love the sound of that. Jess is an international media coach, a brand strategist, and an author. And he has a super unique background in television production and now uses that expertise in what he does today in helping entrepreneurs, small, medium, and large businesses. Jesse, we are so excited to have you on with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. And what a great intro. My God, thank you very,
Um,
very much for that.
you know what? You are the star. You're going to share with us how to find our star qualities. But right now, we are throwing out the red carpet for you and hope that we can take you on this journey of this Mentor Moments interview.
Awesome, awesome.
Amazing. Well, Jess, we have a little bit of a Next Gen HQ tradition to start us off with, and that's some rapid fire questions. So I'm going to
Okay,
throw some quick questions out at you. Whatever first comes to mind is your answer. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Amazing. What is one book that you'd recommend to others?
The Four Agreements.
Oh, okay.
Four
Amazing.
Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz has to do with a lot of sort of Native American traditions and thoughts on how to approach life.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard of that one before, so I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to have to add that to the list. Amazing. What's your spirit animal?
My spirit animal is a penguin.
Oh.
I love penguins. There's just something about them that I've always loved, that they're these amazing, wonderful, witty characters. And I've just always been drawn to that. That's so funny. Like, I didn't even think about that. It just came out.
I love that. That means it was meant to be. So that's perfect. How
Mhm.
about your best method of working productively?
My best method of working productively, I work my best when I take breaks.
Mm.
And that is knowing when to stop. So knowing when to stop if you're in a creative rut and you just keep pounding your head against the wall. It's knowing when to stop when you're hungry or you're tired. It's also knowing when to stop when you're in conversations that are going into a loop. And so I think that what I say is when I work at my best is when I take those moments to be aware of that, to be mindful of it, and step out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that one is such a good response to that question. I love that. And finally, what is your Sunday afternoon nirvana?
My Sunday afternoon Nirvana, that is great. It is an afternoon that is completely unplanned, that usually involves something outside, ideally with my partner, Zach,
Oh,
and no have tos. We
mm,
don't have to do anything in the house. We don't have to tend to family. We don't have to tend to work. We just go. So, an uncharted afternoon with my loved one doing something that's completely unplanned.
oh, you have had some of the best answers to rapid fire questions yet, and I've done a lot of these, Jess.
Oh,
So I
good. Good.
applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, now we know you a little bit better now, a little bit more on a personal level. So we're going to dive into more of the juicy side of this conversation and ask
Okay.
you a couple questions about what your journey has been and how you've really just gotten to this point in your career. And I'm really excited to start off throwing it back a little bit to when you
Mhm.
first started within the television industry
Yes.
and how that's kind of shaped where you are today. So do you mind telling us a little bit about how you found that passion and kind of what triggered you to start in that industry? And what were some of the big lessons you learned that you still carry with you to this day?
So, from a very early age, I was drawn towards entertainment, drawn towards media, drawn towards television. Like, many kids, I just was so fascinated with TV. And I didn't know that there could be a career doing this. Initially, I thought, like, when I went into college, a lot of people wanted to be like host, or wanted to be on camera. And otherwise, people wanted to be journalists. And I had no idea that there was this whole production side, that there were people that actually created the content from conception. And so being in Los Angeles, I had the opportunity to immerse myself right away. And I started at a local TV station here in Los Angeles, KTLA. And my cousin actually got me in because she was the intern coordinator. And it just fit. It was one of those things that I think on the first day I went out and I did a field shoot. And I just kind of got the idea that we are storytellers. And as a TV producer, I was a storyteller. And the way that I worked is actually pulling stories out of our guests. And so I had to do pre-interviews. I had to make sure that what our guests were saying was going to be relevant to our audience and also relevant to themselves so that they optimized that moment so that it was a win-win for both of us. And that was something that I feel like I learned early on because it wasn't a story that just had a beginning, a middle, and end in terms of words on a piece of paper, but actually conversations. And so when I first started at KTLA, even though it was a morning news, it was like entertainment news. We had celebrities who did the weather. We had celebrities who would just, pop on the set. And so that immediately sort of immersed me, baptism by fire by just going into it. I kind of rambled there, so hopefully that all makes sense. But like I kind of go back into these places and it's like, oh, that story, that story, that story.
I love it. You are welcome to share as many stories as you want. I'm definitely a narrative girl, so the more details the better. But I love how it seems like there's a really big focus on that for you as well, storytelling, and how your early experiences working in production in those modes really showed you how important it is to make a narrative. It's not just a one-off situation, it's how everything ties together and how one thing fluidly leads to another. I love that. I think that's so important.
It really is. And the one thing about, traditional media when it comes to, broadcast news or even print is that this idea of a soundbite, you capitalize on the moment, right? Everybody has these 15 minutes of fame. And when you're doing a TV interview or even like now an online interview, you have a finite amount of time. So what are you going to do to capitalize on that moment to not only make a point, but also to engage? I believe there are two pieces to communication that are really important. And one is to inform your audience, and the other is to connect with them. So if you're going to share a story that's going to speak to people's hearts, not only their mind, and find ways that you're able to do that in a short amount of time. I just mentioned sound bites. The way that I look at sound bites is not necessarily that they're 30 seconds, but that they are standalone comments that even if they're taken out of context, still accurately represent your brand. So if you're going to make a statement, think about the statement being lifted and used over here. Does that statement accurately represent you? Does it accurately represent your brand? Does it accurately represent your irresistible offer?
I love that. I think that leads perfectly also into some of these next questions that I have for you, because it seems like you are very much focused on ensuring that everything has purpose, has meaning, connects to the larger individual, and kind of pulling out those standalone moments, even of an individual, seems like it's very important. So I was doing a little bit of research into your book, Everyday Celebrity, and I love the idea of the A factor formula and how to really bring out authentic self-promotion and just really always having your best foot forward, it seems. Do you mind diving a little bit into that formula and how you're really able to pinpoint what it is that makes authenticity and genuineness and promotion so needed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what is really interesting to set context is that even though I come from Hollywood and the entertainment capital of the world, the idea that people can be authentic is sometimes fascinating to people because we're talking about an industry that's all about self-promotion. And if you look at the people that we like and that we're attracted to, they all reveal something about themselves. So even though it's purposeful, it is still authentic. And I think the first thing that I want to say is that purposeful doesn't mean inauthentic. It just means you're selective in putting your best self forward. So the A factor is a formula that I came up with that looks at three different elements. First is your audience. So who are you speaking to? Every different audience wants something a little different from you. So as a child, you knew right away that the way that you were going to speak to your friends was very different than the way that you were going to speak to your parents. So you learned how to share different stories in different ways with different audiences. So your audience is your first thing. Your second thing is your agenda. So what is the point that I want to make? What is my purpose in that interview? So people think of agenda sometimes in a negative way, but what I want to say is think of it as talking points. So what are your 3 points that you want to make sure that you convey to that particular audience, right? Not just any audience, but that audience. What's going to speak to their heart and to their mind? The third thing is the call to action, or the CTA. So that really encapsulates this idea that you have that short amount of time, that what is the end point that you want to make? And quite often it is either like a request, an offer, or a proposal. A request is, I would like this from you. I would like you to buy my book. The proposal is, if you buy it now, you get it on sale. So that call to action in many ways is the plug. So like in a celebrity interview, it's like, watch my TV show. The thing about the call to action is quite often people feel very awkward about it. They feel like, oh, I don't want to promote something. Why are you there? Just be transparent about it. Just say, I'm here to talk about my book. That's all you have to say, and don't make it a thing. I think too often we make it a thing, and so it becomes very awkward.
It's almost like we are the ones putting so much thought into, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm fake. They're going to think I want something, when in reality, like, we all want something, right? Like, out of every conversation and action we take, there's always some sort of end goal. So why not just be transparent about that from the start?
Absolutely. So like think of it in dating, right? If you're having a conversation with somebody that you just met, right? So not necessarily in a professional setting, but you're talking to that individual and you didn't ask that person out, right? And you walked away and you're like kicking yourself in the head and like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And you're thinking about that individual, weeks later. The same thing is with a call. That's a call to action, right? That moment you seize that opportunity to make a further connection. The same thing happens in other conversations where, what, I could talk about my business, or I can tell them, why don't we set up a lunchtime business conversation to discuss possibilities further. But unless you actually name it, unless you actually say it, it never happens. And that moment may never come back up again.
Do you think this formula of audience, agenda, and CTA also goes for more than just self-promotion? Like, do you think even just a team member working at a company would be able to use this in order to?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important because when you go into a business meeting, and you're in a conference room, back in the day when we all could be together, right? You would walk in, and do you know what you want to say? Do you know what end result? And like the CTA might be, I want them to know that I have good ideas, right? And so my audience are contemporaries, and also there's a boss there. My agenda, in order for them to know that I have good ideas, I've got to be able to present a couple good ideas. So you walk into that meeting with this in mind. Now, again, I really want to underscore this: purpose doesn't equal inauthenticity, right? You can be authentic in your purpose, and quite often you are more authentic if you've thought it out. And so I do think it works for team meetings, it works for colleagues, it works in a lot of situations, even personally, as I just described.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I'm taking away so much information from this about just how to even just think more intentionally about every situation that I walk into, and how I'm presenting myself, and what is that purpose really behind it. I love this. So as far as this formula goes, I'm sure it took you a bit of time to get to the point of really understanding this, really figuring out how everything worked together, and then being able to almost kind of test this out with yourself and finding what your A formula works in the ways that you function as an entrepreneur. So in those earlier stages, when you were in that space of kind of figuring this out, ideating, getting to that good point, what was that process like, of just kind of those early moments, and how would you encourage an entrepreneur in our community who's at those early stages of figuring out what genuine self-promotion looks like?
It's a great question. So a lot of it is experimentation, at least for me in what I did. So When I coach people, you have to be very in the moment, and you've got to be able to listen. And when you listen, to hear things that are not being said, but that are being understood, or the way that somebody is trying to communicate something. And what I found is I was beginning to break things down, because it's almost like I reverse engineer conversations. So I'm listening to things, and then I'm kind of playing it backwards and going, okay, well, these are the different elements. And what I started assessing after a while are these different pieces, right? That there's the audience, that people sometimes don't have a clear agenda, and quite often, I mean, a lot, don't have a call to action, don't have a purpose in that conversation. So the way that I was able to really begin figuring this out is I had notes and notes and notes and notes after every coaching session, trying to say, okay, well, what is similar here, what is similar there, and then kind of just went back to my TV roots, from the very beginning. When we're there doing a talk show, when we're there doing a broadcast, it's for an audience. So I began to sort of model this as we as individuals are broadcasters of our own content. So we are broadcasters of our own content verbally. We are broadcasters of our own content when we're online. We're broadcasters of content when we're doing social media. So as a broadcaster, what is my purpose? And so when I started looking at it less as an individual and more as a business model, that we as individuals are a business, it was a little easier for me, because what I did is I took the psychology out a little bit and then put it back in. And so for me, that was the biggest breakthrough, is to identify that we as individuals are businesses.
I love that. And I think it's so reminiscent of where so many next geners are and what they're really going to take away from this. They aren't just an individual human amongst a sea of others. They are their own business. They are a broadcaster of whatever their beliefs, their purpose, their mission, their vision is. I think that's so powerful right there. And on this note of speaking of our audience, and to kind of wrap this up with a little bow, because we've already taken so much of your time, I don't want to take too much more, but you are speaking to a lot of young individuals, so kind of early to mid 20s. They are building businesses, they are figuring out their own personal journeys and how everything works together. If you could say what your hope is for the next generation of leaders who you're speaking to right now, what would that be?
Listen to your intuition. I think that that's really important. And intuition is not a strange concept. If you're my age, it would almost seem sort of like metaphysical, very Eastern in terms of idea. But intuition is a muscle that I believe our young generation understands, because, for example, as digital natives, before you respond to something, you're already thinking about how it's going to be received. You know that if there's an emoji, what that's going to elicit in someone. So your instinct is something that's a part of you, right? And so what I would say is listen to that instinct, listen to your intuition. I think that's the first part of it. Also, because you have good intuition when it comes to communication, challenge yourself to get off of this when you can and get into this. Because as a broadcaster, you already know what it is that you want to say. Now challenge yourself to do it in different ways. So not only when you type, not only when you text, but also when you speak.
I love that. So two really important lessons. First off, listen to your intuition, listen to those instincts that are calling out to you. And secondly, be a broadcaster of your own content, but in different mediums. It doesn't always have to be on a cell phone, but there are so many other ways that we can connect with people and communities and organizations out there in the world.
Absolutely. You got it. You nailed it.
Amazing. Thank you. And I know our next geners are going to nail this. Jess, thank you so, so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This has truly been such a pleasurable experience. So we appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'm so glad. And I hope everybody out there is able to get something from this, because we're relying on you.
Absolutely. If someone is able to get something from this, which is inevitable, and they want to connect more with you and what you're doing, how would they best go about that? Do you have?
Yeah, thank you very much. Go to jp3globalmedia.com. On there, I have my contact information, or you can find me on social media. It's Jess Ponce, III. all of my handles are like that. And that's because of the third.
Amazing. We're going to get some next geners over into your world for sure, Jess. For now, we'll end this conversation so you can go broadcast your own content, and we will see you soon on another Mentor Moments episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.